Good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock and it's our Thursday night photo talk. So thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to have Paolo talking tonight. We were first introduced to Paolo during his artist in residency at PPAC, and he made the most beautiful pictures while being here in Philadelphia. In our neighborhood, Kensington and Fishtown. So I'm so excited that he's talking tonight. And as an extra bonus, he's talking here tonight from Philadelphia. So he's relocated to Philly. So thank you, Paolo, for coming to Philly. We love having you here.
Glad to be here.
And I just want to say, everyone, just be on the lookout for upcoming photo talks and classes and workshops. We've got a ton online, so check out our website. And tonight's format, Lori Wazlachuk, who's our exhibitions and programs coordinator, who's been running the photo talks, is going to talk about not only Paolo, but also the format for the night. So thank you so much, Lori, for all your work. And take it away.
Thank you, Sarah. Welcome, everyone. I'm very excited and honored, actually, that Paolo is our featured speaker tonight. I wanted to announce a very exciting news in regards to the Philadelphia Thursday night photo talks. We have an underwriter who's supporting the talks and the artist fees. Artist fees for the Thursday night photo talk have been underwritten by the Lillian F. and Jerome L. Sindler Fund for visual media. That was the first time I said it. I'm sorry. I'm going to get it better the next time. The Lillian F. and Jerome L. Sindler Fund for Visual Media. Additional support is also provided by the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation. So the Thursday night photo talks are getting a lot of love, not just from all of you in our audience, in our community. Thank you. Some of you have been very, very generous to this program, but we're super proud to have an underwriter and to have foundation support from the Knight Foundation. It's going well and it's going to keep going better. So thank you all very much. Paolo Morales is a photographer. He grew up in New York City and lives in Philadelphia. Recent solo exhibitions include Hamiltonian Gallery, the George Washington University, and XYZ Art Gallery at Virginia Tech. Group exhibitions include the Ogden Museum of Southern Art, New York Asian Film Festival, and the Virginia Museum of Contemporary Art. Artist residencies include Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture, the Blue Mountain Center, and Philadelphia Photo Arts Center. He received an MFA in photography from Rhode Island School of Design and teaches at the Agnes Irwin School. Thank you, Paolo.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Sarah. I'm so excited to be here tonight and to share some pictures with you. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Okay, hopefully everyone is good with that. We're good, right, Lori?
Looks good.
Okay, awesome, cool. Just checking. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here tonight. And I'm so excited to see so many familiar faces and names here. So thank you everyone for coming. And the title of my talk is Take Care of Each Other. So I divided the presentation into 5 parts representing 5 areas that I lived in since I finished college in 2012. And the goal of the talk is to describe an intuitive, documentary-driven approach to photography. And I like to think and say that the people who appear in my photographs are individuals who maybe crave emotional and physical support from others. And I hope the pictures you're about to see communicates my admiration for them as people. So part 1. So after college, I moved home to New York City, and then I went to Providence for graduate school. And I'll show you some of the pictures from that just to begin. So when I got to Providence to go to school, I was photographing anything and everything. And one of the things that I love to do as a photographer is to walk around and approach people to take photographs and, say, "Hi, I'm Paolo, I'm a photographer. Can I take a picture?" And I've been doing that, practicing that, I think, from one class I took as a high school student and definitely throughout college. And I did it more in grad school. And so here's a picture I made one day, I think in the first or second semester of school. And I remember being really nervous, and I was like so desperate for pictures because I had to put up work for Crit the next week, as for the photographers in the room know. And so here's one of the pictures I made near my apartment in Providence. And this is a picture of a woman named Cindy. She's the woman on the left. She's combing the hair of her grandson, Jeremiah, the one looking back at the camera. And then her other grandchild, Elijah, is in the background, and Skylar is the child behind the fence. And this was an exciting moment for me, not just because I got someone to agree to let me photograph them after a long day of shooting, but also because I felt like I finally made a picture that encompassed my interests as a photographer. And so here are 4 people together within the confined space of a frame who look like they are maybe longing, who are in close physical proximity, but still maybe feel emotionally distant. And so after that picture, I hadn't really brought back prints to people. I hadn't been able to use photography to develop a rapport or a relationship with people. And so I brought back the prints, and I tried to, start a photographic relationship, so to speak. And this is Cindy's daughter, Lady, the woman in the middle, and her 3 children around her. And so, I made a lot of work as a student. This is just one part of the work that I happened to make. And I show this work to begin with, just to think about the different ways that I, as a photographer, was able, or sort of train myself to try and approach people and put myself in situations for the explicit purpose of making a photograph. That's Cindy on the right with her daughter on the left. I like the way they're sort of curling into each other in the Marilyn Monroe t-shirt that Cindy's wearing. This one, I think, was one of the more successful pictures that I made of them. So those are 2 kids, they're reaching up for each other, and they're reaching up to the sky like that. The face is shown and hidden of the boy in the background. It's like they're playing a game or something. This is another one. So that's Cindy in the yellow t-shirt and her niece sitting next to her, and the 3 kids on the right side. So I like the feeling here that maybe people are distant, but again, together in the space of a picture. That's Cindy and her husband. I like the way her eyes are open in that photograph. There's like deep affection there, but also maybe some fear. And I love the way that the man is, grasping Cindy's head so intently, but then the other hand on the right side, if you can see my mouse over here, isn't as intense. So here's Junior, that's Cindy's husband, on the right side of the frame, peering out the window, and then his cousin on the other side of the frame. So I like how people can be within the same space of a frame, but still physically divided. So I got to go to birthday parties sometimes. This is at a birthday party. The kid is crying, and I love the way that he's holding on to the child, and then the mother figure is taking something out of the baby's mouth. That's Cindy's son, Alex, getting his hair cut. I like the way that his eyes are closed. It's like he's dreaming of the women in the posters up top over there. That's Cindy and her son, Alex, in their living room or kitchen area, rather. And then the 3 grandchildren together. It's like they're in a mirror game, and then the little girl's left out. And this was during Christmas one year. And so I begin with this work to build a framework, so to speak, of how I approach other projects of my grandfather and the current project I'm making in Philadelphia right now titled Memphis Tulips. And so, I look at this work I did earlier as like, exciting in that I was able to learn to do the kind of work that I wanted to do, or rather that I do now. And I was just like, I was so like, I couldn't get myself to be a more focused photographer, like pun intended, when I was a student, just because I couldn't figure out how to focus on a single subject to make a project, basically. Second project. So after grad school, I moved to Arlington, Virginia, which is a suburb of Washington, D.C. And I moved there because I got a part-time job teaching high school, the Potomac School in McLean, Virginia, which is another suburb of Washington, D.C. And part-time teaching in high school is another way of saying no health insurance. So I didn't realize until recently how unhappy I was there in terms of like my inability to sustain myself as a person, to live a life and not just try and be a photographer. So I lived in Arlington for 4 years, from 2015 to 2019. And the project I made there is called Between You and Me. So when I moved there, I was like 24, 25 years old, and it was my first time living in the suburbs. I grew up in Manhattan in New York City. So I'm used to cities, which is why I love living in Philadelphia right now, because I think cities to me make sense. And I never understood why people would want to live in the suburbs in the first place. And so it was like a real shock to me to live there. And this is a self-portrait that I made that I used to make every year on my birthday, on a birthday. It's like in this picture, I feel like I'm looking at something buried in the backyard. So when I moved there, I hadn't driven before. I drove with my dad, which is a very traumatic experience. And I drove with one of my classmates from school, Talasa, who I think is here tonight, hopefully. She taught me to drive one time in Providence. But anyway, growing up in New York City, I never planned to drive. Like that was never my life plan. I just assumed I would live there for the rest of my life. But I haven't. And so, driving was a really horrific and intense experience for me. And so when I moved to Virginia, I took the driving test 3 times. I failed the first 2 times and passed the last time. And I failed the permit test the first time, and I passed the next time. But I finally learned to drive, thank goodness. And, cars totally changed my work because I'm able to move around, I'm able to take pictures, I'm able to move to different places and just see more of the world. This, thankfully, is not my car, but is a car near my house, or the house I lived in Arlington. That's in Richmond, Virginia, at a place called Belle Isle. And I like that the woman's shirt says love on the right. So as a student, I made a lot of pictures in color, and then I switched to black and white. And the reason I did that was because I hadn't really printed in black and white for a long time, since college, I think. And the job I had at the high school, I had to teach black and white photography. And so I had to make sure I knew how to print, remember how to print, and know how to expose. And so I started shooting black and white film again, just to make sure I was ready for the students. And I just kind of stuck with it in my own work. I like how objects become synonyms for feelings or emotion, like how the 2 fences here are locked together. I like that the tree maybe looks wounded here in the photograph. This man's name is Pei. He owned the house I lived in Arlington. I like that he put up like a representation of a house on his house, like of lovely suburban houses on his other lovely suburban house. This was in New York, not the suburbs, so that's okay. I like how the two gates here, like they just passed each other, they just missed each other, or they, they're holding on to each other or something, or they're leaning on each other. This was in Washington. I was walking around taking pictures, and I saw these two drunk couples. I think they were drunk, and the two women were trying to hold up their boyfriends basically, and I asked to photograph them, and they said yes. Also in Washington. More self-portraits. I lived in a really crappy apartment in Virginia, and I made a lot of pictures there, and this is one of the self-portraits of myself peering out. This one was made at the Society for Photographic Education conference. This was in Las Vegas, I think, that year. And so I showed this because this was in a show of this work between you and me, and it was written about in a review, and I loved what the reviewer wrote in terms of its narrative possibility for the photograph. So he wrote about how the two people might be a couple, how it might be two men, two women, a woman and a man. We just don't know. And are they having a fight? Are they having a romantic getaway? So like there's a lot of potential for meaning within this photograph. So that picture was in a show at Hamiltonian Gallery called Between You and Me, and it was written about in the Washington Post, and that picture was printed there, and that was really exciting for me. Then is exciting for me. And I had, so the show at Hamiltonian Gallery was part of a Hamiltonian Artists Fellowship program based in Washington, DC. It's like a 2-year program where you get 2 solo shows and a couple group shows, and then you get some professional development support. And it's a really great program, and I just had a great time being able to show my work there. Some more pictures from that show. And then that work, the work I did in Virginia and in grad school led to a commission at Vice magazine called The Grave Bench. This is of my parents at the grave of my grandmother. I'd never done at that point commissioned or licensed photography, so it was totally new to me and very exciting. They licensed that picture of my parents, but then I made these other photographs for that story. So this is near my house in Arlington, and this one was in Providence. I made a lot of self-portraits when I was living there. I had like lower self-esteem, and a photographer, I knew a lot of photographers who talked about the seductive lighting of pictures. And so whenever I saw seductive light, I would try to put myself in it to see if I could, increase my confidence by making a picture. My foot stuck in rope. The title Between You and Me, I think, has multiple meanings or interpretations. So in one way, it can refer to the space between two people, or something standing in the way, or even a secret. And maybe the secret is that the pictures can be between you and me, as in you and me as a viewer, you and me as people, you and me as a general audience. This is a picture I made at Blue Mountain Center in Blue Mountain Lake, New York, which is upstate New York. And I was really excited about this picture because I was reading a lot of John Zarkowski, and John Zarkowski wrote a great book of essays on Eugene Atget's photographs, who photographed a disappearing Paris, so to speak. And Zarkowski wrote a lot about Atget's chairs, and Zarkowski would describe the chairs in Atget's photographs as representative of a person who might not have come yet, but still might, or a person who was there but maybe had left. And so I like to think of this picture as maybe going a step further to imply not only two people, but perhaps two people of different races, because one chair is dark, one chair is lighter. This is the Adjay photograph from the Zarkowski book. That's on the side of the road in Richmond again, an hour from where I lived in Arlington, and an hour from Arlington, an hour and a half rather. And that's the backyard I had in Arlington. And I like the two ladders, like they're leaning on each other and leaning on the other divider there in the backyard. And I did a lot of, running there around the neighborhoods and stuff. And I remember this person's Halloween decorations always freaked me out. So I wanted to make a photograph of that. Part 3. So after college, I moved back to New York, or to my parents' house, and I sort of fell into a teaching job at a place called Photo Uno Photography School, which was a continuing ed program basically. And I lived there for a year before going back to school. This is a portrait I made of my grandfather. His name is Pablo. My father's name is Paul, therefore I was named Paolo. My grandfather and I weren't that close when I was growing up. And so photography was a great way to forge a connection with him. And so I'm sort of jumping around a bit in terms of the time here. So I made a lot of these pictures in college, after college, in grad school, and after grad school. So it's all encompassing, so to speak. It's my grandfather in this study. One of my teachers from college is here, Christine, and I remember talking about the Tina Barney photograph with Christine where the grandmother is sitting with a bunch of chairs in front of her. And so when I saw this, I wanted to make this photograph. And I was teaching at Photo Uno, and I was working like 40 hours a week for like no money. And so I knew I had to make pictures to continue making pictures. And so I would go with my parents to visit my grandparents every weekend. And that's how I photograph basically. This was after a fire at their house in New York. And this is the first picture I made of my grandfather that I felt like had palpable tension. So here he's holding a hose, but the ceiling above him is falling apart. There's a long history and tradition of photographers using family members as subjects. So for example, Harry Callahan's pictures of his wife, Eleanor, and their daughter, Barbara, and McGowan, who was Callahan's student, or Henry Hornstein, who was one of my teachers, or LaToya B. Frazier, who photographed and collaborated with her mom in her book called The Notion of Family. She's also one of my teachers at the Skowhegan residency in Maine. Doug Dubois, who was Frazier's teacher at Syracuse, and Larry Sultan. And this is one of my pictures of my grandparents and my mom on the top left. So, in some ways, it was difficult for me to make pictures of my family because I hadn't seen work by people who looked like me or of people who looked like me. And so the idea of representation has become even more important to me in the past few years. And so as an Asian American male, I hadn't seen work that made me feel like I had been seen in photography. And so one of the things I hope to do with my work of my family is to talk about an Asian American narrative, or in particular a Filipino American narrative, in the space of American photographs about family. So this is the project I made of my grandfather called The Blind Leading the Blind. And I made this work sporadically over the years. And I wasn't doing it consciously. I remember talking to friends over the years about the work of my grandfather, and people would tell me, like, I think that's a project. And I was like, no, I don't believe you. But I mean, I do believe them. And I like wasn't listening to the pictures. But then after he passed away, then I felt like I could finally make or put together an edit of the work of him in a way that I could look at in a detached manner. And so the point, the issue of the work, I guess, or the thing I'm trying to explore, is looking at an individual who was once physically independent, transitioning to becoming totally dependent on others for support. And basically the work is revolving around his loss of eyesight in the last 5 years of his life. He died when he was 97 years old. So here are two nurses opening his eyes. And I think this is one of the only photographs I have of him where I could see his eyes, because his eyes are almost always closed. It's my grandfather and his nurse in the car after my grandmother's funeral in 2013, I think, or 2014. And I like the picture because it points to both interior and exterior space. Interior space of the car, but exterior space. The picture's made outside of the car of exterior space. Having dinner. It's my grandfather and my shadow. It's my cousin Christopher and our grandfather, and I think this was a few months before he died. I think light is really meaningful for me in this work, like in terms of seeing and the idea of blindness, or the way that his head is in shadow here, or his face rather is in shadow. So this was like a mistake. I meant to light up his face when I lit up his head with the flash, but it became meaningful later on. It's my dad. This one was a really important picture for me because it showed him, my grandfather, in a life jacket, which in theory should make him able to survive on his own, but he still needs 3 other people to support him, and even a wheelchair to support him. Shadows. Maybe this is too saccharine of a picture, but I think it works in the edit. Hopefully it works in the edit. A self-portrait. I remember making this picture just a few, like, I think in my final semester of school, and I was like, I couldn't handle the picture just because it looked like he was dead. But it was really important to me to use photography to memorialize someone I love, and memorialize someone who was an important part of my life and became a definitely important part of my photography. And I don't think I would have made this work if you could see. So in that way, perhaps it's ethically problematic. But I also think that the pictures are my ultimate love letter to him, and also his ultimate gift to me, because it was something that only he and I shared. I remember this being a really intense moment when I was photographing. He didn't have a pulse because his blood sugar was low. And that's his nurse on the left with the hat on. And I was crying. I couldn't handle it, so I just I had to take pictures. And I was in a total trance from when I was when I was in school to I guess the couple of years after, in terms of as a photographer. And all I cared about was taking pictures. And I don't know if I would be that way now, but I certainly was that way then. But I'm glad I have the photographs right now. And this is the last color photograph of him. I like that the TV says love, LUV, over there. So the color pictures show him when he's alive, and then the black and white pictures show life after he passed away. And I remember just shooting everything: color, black and white, digital, film, everything. And I had so many different pictures, I couldn't deal with it. And so as a teacher, I always get really upset when I see mixed color black and white projects, because it's almost always illogical, or there's no logic behind it. I can't find a logic behind it. So my solution as a photographer was to divide the color in black and white photographs to differentiate between when he was alive versus when he passed away. This is the fountain that I hopefully remember from some of the other photographs. I like that it's covered as if it's a person who died. And here is a chandelier in his house. I like that one is lit up, but the others are not lit up, so it's like he's fading away. Okay, 4. So I was living in Virginia and Arlington, and then like a miracle, I got a residency at Philadelphia Photo Art Center, PPAC. So I went there in 2017 to print for the Between You and Me show that I showed previously, and to make other pictures. And so this is a mural outside the Airbnb where I stayed in Kensington. And I remember seeing it when I first got to Philadelphia, and I just was like so amazed by the beauty of the painted flowers contrasted with the potted flowers on the bottom left corner. And when I got to Philadelphia, you know, I saw this amazing neighborhood that was going through intense change, and it was like a dream. Like I just saw pictures. This sounds ridiculous, but like I saw pictures flashing before my eyes, and I just knew I wanted to photograph in the area where I was staying. And so one of the things I did and continue to do and have done is walk around taking pictures. And so, you know, I would go to PPAC every day to scan and print and get ready for my show. And then after the first couple of days, I was getting really antsy. You know, I was like, I got to take pictures. And so I remember walking around in the neighborhood, and I turned a corner. I saw these 2 kids playing basketball, and I said, okay, I'm gonna walk up to these kids, approach them, I said, hi, I'm Paolo, I'm a photographer. Do you want to post some pictures? And they said, sure. Just like I've always done with everyone for wherever I've lived. And so it was no big deal to me. And so I was photographing, and then suddenly a woman came out, and she's like, what are you doing? I was like, oh, I'm like, one of the kids answered me. It's like, he was like, don't worry, he's just a photographer. And then before I knew it, she approached me saying, delete the pictures. And I said, you know, I can, I'm shooting film. So she demanded I give her my film, so I did. And then I left. I was pretty shaken up, and then I remember turning the corner, and then the woman and I assume her husband found me again, and they were like, what do you think you're doing? I said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset anyone. I'm a photographer, I'm a teacher, I'm just trying to work on this project. And they said if I ever came back to their block again, they would hurt me. And so, you know, back to this photograph, I remember photographing in front of this mural, and a man named Sean called out to me. He was like, what are you doing? I said, I'm taking pictures. I love your mural. And, you know, I saw Sean every day because he was my neighbor in Kensington. And I remember telling Sean about my interaction with these kids and their parents. And Sean said basically the neighborhood protects the kids, and they want to protect them and take care of them. And I remember giving the mural print to Sean and his partner, his wife, Katie, and I asked if they would want to post their pictures, and they said no, but instead they agreed to pictures of these lovely tattoos. His tattoo says Hurricane, and her tattoo says His Queen. I just love the way they show their support for each other through tattoos. And so I told Sean about this incident, and he offered to walk over with me to apologize to the family. And it was like this really amazing moment. And I knew after he went over with me that I just wanted to be friends with him and his family. And that eventually led to this project called Memphis Tulips, which I'll show you now. This is Ron and his wife, Dar. I made this on my last night in Philadelphia after the residency. I like that the way he's holding her. It's both loving and constricting. And so during the residency, I would go back to my Airbnb and hang out with Sean and his kids and his wife, his family, and take pictures. It was really great. And this is one of the photographs outside of his garage. I love that there is the painted houses in an otherwise urban environment. And there's a lot of skepticism because of the inclusion of the camera, the security camera over there. That's a woman named Sue, my other neighbor. I love the way people have backyard pools here. It's trying to have like a dose of like nature or suburbia in an urban environment that's maybe a little bit rough. That's not a bullet hole, it's just a hole in the wall. This is a picture I made the summer of 2019 at a birthday party. And one of the things I love about Sean and his family and the community in Kensington is that they are, in my understanding of the way they interact with me and the way that they live their lives, they're necessarily skeptical of outsiders. They're necessarily skeptical of people who are moving into the neighborhood, who are buying up like $300,000 or $400,000 newly built homes. And what I love about Kensington and the community that I photograph is that even though it's a community that's skeptical of outsiders, it's still a place that celebrates and welcomes racial diversity. And so I think that idea is exemplified in this photograph. That a place that is so intently trying to hold its own is also welcoming of people who look different than them. I call the project Memphis Tulips because I lived between Memphis and Tulip Street when I was photographing. I like the way that the fake rocks are contrasted with the house. That's Sean in his doorway. Often he tells me stories where some maybe like violent things happen, and so I think that's exemplified by the baseball bat. He's not a violent guy at all. He's here tonight, I think. I'm pretty sure in the Zoom chat. But I like the way that this picture shows him inside and outside, and always watching. This I made my first summer in Philly. I couldn't help but thinking of my grandmother when I made this photograph. And thinking about this picture, I used to think and used to say that my gender and my race were irrelevant to understanding how photographs look and function, that they're just photographs, that the person who made them doesn't necessarily influence, and you can't point to it inside the photograph. Like I went to a school where we talked about pointing a lot, like pointing to interior information in the frame, that nothing exterior to the frame mattered. And so that's how I understood pictures. But as I've been in the world, I think that my race and the time the pictures are made certainly do matter. So in my photograph, we see a racially diverse family holding on to each other, which is similar to Dorothea Lange's photograph and perhaps Walker Evans's photograph. So my question for myself is, what differentiates my work between these two other photographers? Well, one is obviously my race, and the two is the time it's made in, and three is the formal aspect. So maybe it's similar to Dorothea Lange's, different than Walker Evans, because in Walker Evans, we're seeing a relationship between the photographer and the subject, or at least a gaze. But what else is different too is that my picture shows a racially diverse family, which we don't see in other FSA, Farm Security Administration photographs from the Great Depression. This is my ode to Latoya B. Frazier. She has a few pictures of people with dolls in them. For a while, I tried to make the most complicated picture I could, which meant to try and fill the frame with as many things going on that still felt coherent. That's Sean standing on a railing. I love this picture because he's standing on the railing, so it's like any time he could fall off, but he's still balanced, a lot like how I think he functions, and like a balanced person. And I love the inclusion of the ladder, because ladders are normally like a way to climb up, but it's down on the ground in this photograph. That's at Sean's son on the left at his birthday party. This picture, I think, has a lot of racial tension in it. Sean and Katie. I love the way her bun is leaning on his arm. I think it's a very sensual moment. That's Ron. I recently learned that the reason that Ron's eye is he doesn't have his right eye is because he was shot in the eye, and he incredibly survived. Sean and his sister looking at the new houses being built. Like, there's an intense tension in the neighborhood between new people and old people, and I'm trying to partially describe that in the photographs. It's Ron in his car. Sean and Katie. It's one of the first pictures I made of that mural. It's one of Sean's relatives. I remember seeing that tattoo, and I said, "I love your tattoo." And he said, "Thank you, but it's unfinished." And I said, "Oh, when are you going to finish it?" And he said he couldn't because his brother drew it, and his brother just passed away. Another birthday party. So back to the tattoos for a minute. I love the way that Sean memorializes even his parents on his arm, the way he memorializes Katie on his near his hand. Sean and his brother. This is a memorial for Sue's daughter, the woman in that pool photograph a couple slides ago. And I've been trying to make this picture for years. Like, I've made 5 versions of this photograph, just to try to get the framing right. But I really love this memorial because of the way the community lifts their members up and tries to show them and acknowledge each other. And this picture shows a memorial for someone who died almost just 4 years ago when she was in her 20s. It's Ron again with his Batman t-shirt. Sean and Katie in the living room. So another reality of this project too is like, what is like an Asian American man doing hanging out with this family in Kensington? And that is implicit in the work. It's implicit because, you know, you never saw me in the pictures, but now I'm explicitly here in the photographs. And so hopefully these self-portraits will make the photographs also about me and my relationship with Sean and his family. Peering over. Sean and Ron are next door neighbors, so I'm pretty sure here he was knocking on Ron's window, but it looks like he's like looking to the street or peering around, like looking or surveilling or something. On their roof at in their house, and 2 kids looking at the new houses being built across the street from Sean's house. And so part of the Hamiltonian Fellowship, I had another show, and I showed my color digital pictures that I shot my first summer there. And I shot digital and film side by side just so I could bring back prints quickly. And they wanted to show the color work because I had shown black and white before. And this was that. This was at the Ogden of the black and white pictures. And this work, Memphis Tulips and some of the black and white work in Virginia, recently led to an article, a commission for the New Yorker, which was really exciting for me. This was in Baltimore. I was also lucky to have this work published in Photofilmic in in 2019, edited by Lucy Conticello. And this is some of my pictures in Sean's house, which is the most exciting for me, because I think when people show my work in their houses, when it's of them, I think that's the most meaningful, because that means that that picture is important, or at least has some meaning to them. And I think that is one of the greatest successes as a photographer. Last section, pictures I made in the past year in Virginia, in Roanoke, Virginia, where I lived for a year teaching at a small liberal arts college there. This is fragile ecosystem, sort of how I feel about the world right now in terms of dealing with COVID-19, and certainly how I felt about my career as a teacher before moving to Philadelphia, that everything was so kind of like difficult and fragile. As both a high school and college teacher, just to think about like how to navigate that world, I guess. This I made in Athens, Georgia, when I attended the Humid, which is a workshop run by Mark Steinmetz and Irina Rozovsky. So Roanoke was a train city. They called themselves Magic City. And so just tried to photograph the train tracks there. People were like, they had this really intense stare to them. Like they would stare at me when I was in Roanoke, and that was really intense for me. So I felt like an outsider. And so I tried to photograph people's reactions to me in the downtown area where I lived. Impending danger. So like, I don't know if this is like a good argument for the pictures or not, but I'm trying to think about how I, as a person of color, as an Asian American male, how I can occupy the world, and can my race be seen in the photographs, even if it's not explicit. This is a recent one from Virginia. I don't know what these are, but they look like crucifixes to me. This is a woman named Mary whose Airbnb I stayed in when I was visiting Roanoke. And I like that her cat has 3 legs. Charlottesville. It says, I love my Yogi, my deaf dog. This is like a violent scene to me, like breaking through. This reminds me of Robert Frank's photograph of the covered car. So in the book, The Americans, he has a photograph of a covered car, which is followed by a picture of a covered body. And so whenever I see covered cars, I always associate it with covered bodies, and this picture reminded me of that. Looking into a dark black hole, so to speak. So in Virginia, you know, COVID was happening. I had a job for a while, then the job ended, and then there were hiring freezes everywhere. And so like getting a job was necessarily difficult for everyone. And so I decided that I wouldn't work and that I would be a photographer and take pictures. So I had the option to stay in Virginia, or I could move somewhere. So I decided to move to Philadelphia to take pictures, because in college and in grad school and in life, like everyone who I admire as artists, they always say the most important thing is the photographs, and that should come before anything and everything. And so I said, okay, I'm gonna move to Philadelphia and be a photographer, and just fully intend not to work and to spend as little money as possible. So I moved to Philadelphia on August 1st, fully intending never to work for like a year, maybe even 2 years. You know, miraculously, 28 days later, I applied to a full-time teaching job at Agnes Urban School in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, which is about 40 minutes, and somehow got that job, and now I'm here, and I'm living the life that I want to live as an artist. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. That was incredible, Paolo.
Thank you.
There are some questions. Sean is
Oh, boy.
in the house and gives a big shout out and lots of love to you. I don't know, Sean, if you want to say anything. You just have to unmute if you want to say hey. No worries if you don't.
No
I do have
worries, Sean. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Love you, brother.
Hey, buddy.
Hey.
Love you too, bro. Thanks for listening.
Share any thoughts if you want. Wow. It's great to see you, Sean. I'm so glad. I do have some questions from the chat that I'll share. Ricky says, did I hear you say that the photo of the 3 children showed a lot of racial tension? Would you go back to it and maybe say more?
Sure. I don't know if that had racial tension necessarily. Hold on, let me just. I don't know if that had racial tension. It just showed people of different races, and they're holding on to each other, they're caring for each other. It was just different to me than the Dorothea Lange photograph, where it looks like they're all people with whiter skin. But I didn't say it had tension. I think the picture's about grasping for each other and holding on to each other, and a certain amount of love for sure too.
Oh, Hannah says it's the birthday photo.
Oh, sorry, the birthday photo. I'm sorry. Whoops. Yeah, this one. Just because of the way the child on the right is maybe staring at this boy on the left, like that's a really intense stare, and she's staring at her. Like I like imagining what is going through their minds at this moment, like just trying to get cake. I like the way they're sort of separated, but still close together, how their shirts are both tie-dye, how the boy is maybe not fully aware of what's going on there. So I think for me, it's just the expression.
A comment from Murray, and I just want to kind of put this out on public record. He already is beloved by his colleagues and students at the Agnes Irwin School. Just wanted to put that out there.
Thanks, Murray.
Agnes Irwin is very lucky. Rosanna asks, do you tell your subjects a specific way to pose, or do they decide?
If I'm just meeting them for the first time, I sort of nudge them along. I'm like, do this again, do that, repeat that. I have no problem directing. But as people get more comfortable with me, and as I get more comfortable with them, I certainly make an effort to just respond to the moments happening.
Let's see. And she also asks, what kind of camera do you use? Do you keep careful notes of each photo when it was taken?
I do not keep notes. I use a Mamiya 7 II with a 65mm lens, and I use T-Max 400 film developed in X-Tall 1:1, which you're supposed to develop at 9 minutes 15 seconds, but I develop at 8 minutes 15 seconds to get better highlights.
That's great. Sarah asks, are you still making self-portraits?
I rarely, sometimes, when I see good light, yeah. But it depends. I try to. I keep a tripod in my car.
Sarah says, please continue making them.
I will. Thank you.
Rosanna has a question. What are the reactions of the people you photograph in seeing themselves?
It changes a lot. I bring back prints, and I think they like that. I hope they like my pictures. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if people would tell me if they didn't like the way they look. That's not true though. Like people have definitely told me they don't like the pictures I make of them because they don't think they look good. I had a friend who I remember told me, make me look hotter in one of the photographs I made of them. So yeah, but it just depends. But like Sean, for instance, I can't recall him criticizing how he looks in the picture.
Sean, feel free to come in, but I do want to invite Lexi, who has a question, and please unmute yourself and ask the question.
Hi, it's so great to be here and like listen to you speak, Paolo. Thank you so much for showing everything.
Thanks for coming.
So yeah, I will say this, you can kind of tell based on my name and like maybe my face, but I'm also Philam, like I'm Filipino American.
Cool.
So I really appreciated especially because like recently my grandfather also passed away. So I really found your story on your grandfather really compelling. So I guess my question is, yeah, just knowing like the Philam experience and stuff. And you bring up how it means a lot to you to see your pictures in the homes of those you photograph, like Sean's family. I wanted to know more about like the reactions that your family has to your pictures.
Oh, that's a great question. I'm sorry to hear that your grandfather passed away as well. I know how difficult that can be. My mother does not like the photographs I make of her, which is fine. I think my cousins are okay with them. And you know, my parents have framed some of the pictures I've made of them. But I rarely show them my work, but I just give them pictures on occasion that I've made of them. But yeah, they don't seem to care. I mean, they care, but they don't like. They're not. It's just my mom who's really, she doesn't like the way she looks in the pictures, but that's fine. That's okay.
Yeah, thanks. I would love to talk more. I followed you on Instagram the other day.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
thanks, Lori, for inviting Paolo to talk. Yeah.
Thank you, Lexi. Rosanna, I see you have more questions, but I'm going to move to another person so we can get more people involved. Terry writes, I love how you mentioned how many of the photos or process of taking them are love letters. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Thank you, Terry, for that great question. I think of the pictures of my grandparents, of my grandfather, to be like love letters in that it shows my admiration for them. It shows how they live in their lives. And I guess they're love letters in that, you know, I'm making this work about them and I'm making pictures about them to show like what I think is beautiful about their lives. And one of the things that I think is beautiful is that they're taking care of each other, that they're supporting each other. And I guess one of the connections I wanted to make too in the talk was someone told me once that my work was about people who are struggling. And one connection I would like to make too is that maybe my picture is about my grandparents, of my grandfather, about how he's struggling for life to survive. And maybe the other pictures of in Philadelphia and other places I photographed is struggling to live a life and to function and to survive in the world.
We have time for Rosanna's question. Do you photograph other Filipino Americans who aren't family members? And how do they feel about an Asian photographing them?
I have not photographed any other Filipino American people. I would if I knew people. I thought about going to California for a while just to photograph there, but I realized I really don't like California. Sorry for anyone who lives there. Because I spent time there and everyone was late and I really hated that. So I just stopped wanting to go. But if you know and you offer, you know, I'm happy to take pictures.
That's great. Lexi writes, ironically, I'm in California right now.
Hi,
That's
Lexi.
So I want to just finish with one quote from Sean. He says, I love the pictures. It was a little shocking to see them in a gallery. And I think that's really interesting. I don't know if you have anything else to say, Sean. No worries. This was wonderful. You've got a lot of beautiful comments. It's 8 o'clock, and so we in Philadelphia try to keep things on time in order to keep Paolo in our city. And I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. This was it went by very, very fast, Paolo. Thank you. Your work is very, very beautiful and moving. And I also wanted to let you know that next week our Thursday Night Photo Talk is another Philadelphian.
Oh,
Raymond
cool.
W. Holman Jr. has been photographing the COVID-19 crisis and how it's impacted the Black community in Philadelphia. So I hope you'll come back. We're super excited that Raymond is going to share the work that he's been working on since April. And I hope you all have a good week. We'll see you soon.
Thanks everyone for coming. This was great. So many nice messages. And I'll write to people. So thank you. Thanks, Lori and Sarah.